Now, before we get into, because I'm dying for your perspectives on, the PC-ness of it all. And it seems like from what I've gathered so far, you both kind of have a similar take on this. But before we get into that, I often feel like you guys can be, when talking about like the quotas, right? I feel like often you guys can be like the punchline. Like when people talk about all these quotas in advertising and in Hollywood, it's like, oh, we have the gay person, the black person, the trans person, the person in a wheelchair, right? Like that kind of thing. And so when you hear that, how do you feel? Not to be the boner killer from what we just brag, but how does that, not to be the buzzkill, but how does that make you feel? Maybe I've been guilty of it on my own show, right? Like I feel like that's the kind of thing people run through. So, your immediate kind of thoughts on that.
In media, mainstream media, it's always nice to see, a person with a disability, whether it be wheelchair or, you know, missing an arm or a leg or whatever. Like there's a girl, and you, I mentioned to you about her, Allison, and she's done some modeling. And
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have it down in the States, but Joe Fresh is a clothing line, and she, she did some modeling for them. And you see one of the, billboards or whatever with her on there, and it's like that's pretty cool. And I think for somebody, little, say 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, just trying to get comfortable in their own skin, to walk into, the real Canadian superstore and see Allison, with one leg in there. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not the only person in the world. And then I guess with that whole Bud Light thing, which I mean, you know what, I don't care, about, filling quotas and stuff like that. But one thing I thought to myself and all of that is like, I don't think I've ever seen a person missing a limb or limbs in a beer commercial before. I've not really paid that close attention, but like there's, if you want to, I guess, make sure everybody's represented, then make sure everybody is represented. And one of my worries is, there'll be a, a time when, and I might piss some people off by saying this, but it's my opinion. You don't have to subscribe to my opinion, but
Cancel
there'll
it.
be a time when it's like
Dare
there's so many people with disabilities, and it's like the cool thing to, like, let's have all kinds of people with disabilities in in our movies and in our commercials and stuff like that. It's like, just make it an accurate representation. You don't need to bang the drum too loud on it. That's all I have to say about that.
Caitlin, before you hop in, I'm curious walking that line, because the issue I've taken with this is that it feels forced and it doesn't feel genuine, and it feels like we can tell, right? Like, the audience isn't stupid, and we can tell when these, mainstream, whatever it is, advertisers, companies, movies, like we can tell when they're just trying to fit a quota and it feels forced. So what would you say is like the difference of that versus the genuine authenticity of like what you're getting at, Chris? Like it's the real world and this is what it is, and let's show that.
I mean, I think it's just like following through with it. Like if it, a lot of companies will do it as like a one-off thing, or I think the one thing, or they're like a little hypocritical about it. I was thinking about this before in terms of advertising and stuff, like the Olympics. They love using Paralympians for commercials and things. And then what do? They don't televise the Paralympics. They're just
So
there for that inspirational story to get to suck you in, make you feel like, oh wow, like look at that person. I don't know, maybe give you a little bit of guilt. I don't know what they're trying to do, because obviously it's just like a spot where that you feel like it's being used instead of actually like celebrating the achievements of these people.
Like virtue signaling.
Yeah, of course.
Chris, what do you think?
I guess one thing that, yeah, I agree with you. The Olympics are on 24/7. And then the Paralympics, you really got to go digging, like ESPN 8 some, abstract sports channel to see the Paralympics. And it's unfortunate. There was a national sledge hockey championship back in December out in Halifax, and I remember watching the mainstream, sports net, hoping that they would mention something about Canada and the US playing in the gold medal game. And there wasn't a single bit about it. And it's unfortunate because I think, much like, women's sports, there's a lot of tremendous athletes in para sports that I would love to see represented in mainstream, but also it's not something that I lose sleep over too. It's unfortunate, but I mean, you could get all bent out of shape. And I guess that's why I do what I do. I do what I do because I enjoy life, and life's too short. But if I can go out there and do a marathon, and it kind of opens up people's eyes a little bit and changes their perspective, and maybe encourages them to get out there and do a marathon or go kayaking or whatever, great. It's kind of a sidebar thing, and I'd just love to see it become more normalized, and not something that, so when people come by you and you're getting ready to get into your car, they don't feel like they have to get in there and help you out. They could just go by and see you and be like, you know what, I guarantee you this girl's got it figured out. And then they'll just quietly watch you and see, yeah, no, this girl's badass.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of, I'm wondering, because Caitlyn, you have done modeling in your wheelchair, and you do use the wheelchair. And so when you see, again, like whether it be ad campaigns or modeling or in movies, same thing. It's like, when can you, like, it's almost like, what has pop culture in Hollywood got right and wrong? Like, when can you appreciate it? When does it go too far? What aren't they doing right? Like, that whole picture.
I don't really know. I mean, I kind of, with the whole modeling thing, I figured it was something I should try because, like Chris said, like if I can get it out there, obviously I have a background in fashion. That's like my first 2 degrees. And I thought that this was a good way for me to get involved and, yeah, have younger girls, because I don't know what it would have been like growing up. I can only imagine because it was hard. It's hard enough being like a young kid, a teenage girl growing up to start with, in terms of like body image and all of that, fashion, whatever. So that's kind of why I started doing that. I don't enjoy it. It's not my thing. So here we are. But I don't really follow that much pop culture, so I can't really say. All I do see are like advertising campaigns occasionally. You want to be included, obviously. I don't know. I don't think I have like a good answer for what they've done right and wrong necessarily. It's just like a tone more than anything. Like you should have somebody with a disability there, because we make up like 20 something percent of the population, so if you're representing everyone, you should really represent everyone. But yeah, it's just that like inspirational tone, or that like sometimes it's just an afterthought, like, okay, we just included somebody with a disability just to tick another box off.
Right.
I think the best way we have disability representation is that we do have social media. Like I've learned more tips and tricks and things that have improved my life for the better, like through social media, more so than I have by seeing, Tommy Hilfiger's adaptive clothes or whatever else. I mean, those are helpful to some people, I'm sure, but I think I've become more comfortable and learned more things about how to deal with my everyday life on social media than I have through representation in TV or so.
It's so interesting because have you heard of SKIMS? It's Kim Kardashian's. Yes. So SKIMS I think it was in the last year, but they featured a woman and a model for their line in a wheelchair, and Candace Owens, who's a big conservative pundit, went on a whole thing being like, you know, this is trying too hard, like trying to please everybody and have everyone in. So that's where it's like when it's, you know, we can all have our opinions, right? But it's like, unless it's coming from people like you guys who walk the walk, so to speak, you know, that's where I'm curious. It's like how you react to stuff like that. And maybe it's a case by case basis, you know, maybe it is a time where it's like, no, this feels virtue signally. This feels good. This, you know, I don't know, you know?
Well, it's such a fine line, slippery slope, however you want to put it, where, Skims, I've never heard of Skims for obvious reasons, I guess. But that's awesome that they had somebody in a wheelchair, and it's kind of unfortunate that somebody decides they need to chime in and be, criticize it and say it's too woke or it's too forced or whatever. So then your companies or your producers, film or whatever, like, okay, well, we want to represent people or have accurate representation of the full population, but if we put some in there, then we're going to get criticized for forcing it or trying too hard or trying to be woke. It's like, well, you can't win. Like, I was thinking, before you brought that up, movies. That Jake Gyllenhaal movie that but the guy who lost his leg in the Boston Marathon and the bombing. It's a motivation movie, it's an inspirational movie. And yes, I love stories like that, people overcoming. But yeah, it'd be kind of cool to see a buddy comedy where there's a guy missing arms and legs who gets around on a longboard. Wink. But and he just, you know, jokes around with his buddies, and it's not the token amputee or person with a disability.
The token, right.
It's just completely normalized, and it's completely
Totally.
normal. Like my buddies, they forget oftentimes that I'm even missing arms and legs. Because I just go about my day to day. And that's what I would love to see represented.
You know, I just interviewed Josh Duhamel for his new Paramount buddy comedy. So, you know, we'll put it in his ear and see what we can make happen. But Caitlyn, how about you?
No, that's too funny. Like, I jokingly, like, I read a lot of romances. Wouldn't it be great to have a Hallmark movie where the woman is in a wheelchair? Like, but I with the Skims thing, because you like hit a nerve there. That it wasn't just that they were featuring a woman in a wheelchair, like that was an adaptive, like, bra and underwear set. Like I think the closures are different. It has little like straps to put your fingers in, and her whole thing was like, why is this important? Like, well, because some people have a hard time putting a bra on, and it wasn't just about representation. It was actually about making something that made somebody's life easier. And it wouldn't make a lot of sense to show it on somebody who doesn't need that. So, but like for me with that kind of made me mad. I was like, we're all sitting down. Most of us are probably wearing underwear. Why does it matter if she's in a wheelchair doing that versus at her desk 9 to 5? It's the same thing. So I don't know.
It's interesting because you hear a lot, and again, I've even said this on my show, right? And you guys, I think, are really both getting at something that's really enlightening and true here. Is people will often say, with all of this like plugging and virtue signaling, whatever it is, or representation, what have you, and when it feels virtue signally or like it's the token or filling a quota or has some preachy message, even in film, right? Everything feels so heavy. People often say, we just want an escape, right? We don't want to be bogged down. Like, life is hard right now. We're in unprecedented times. Like, we don't want to be bogged down with all these messages. And from what I'm getting from what both of you guys are saying is, you know what? Like, it can be escape and we can be part of it. Like, again, that kind of thing of like, we don't have to be victimized. Same thing as how we're portraying, Black people in film or even women. It's always like the sob story. And from what I'm getting from both, with both of you guys, it's like, okay, but both things can be true. It's like, yes, we all want an escape, but it's like, Chris, your buddy comedy idea. But it's like, let us be part of it. Like, we don't have to be a virtue signally or like a preachy message. Like, bring us in as part as part. We want the escape too. Let us be part of the escape. Right?
No, for sure. And I think another thing I was thinking is, I mean, for so long, every single movie, television show, advertising, magazine, whatever, everybody in there was pretty damn good looking and mostly white. And, you know, like that's just what you saw. So people don't like change. They get uncomfortable with change. So I mean, only recently, you know, people, people in the LGBTQ community were not represented in film at all. And it was like just it's changing. It doesn't matter if it's LGBTQ, people of color, people with disabilities, or anything. It's just something a little bit different, and people are just having a tough time getting used to it. And for people like us, with a disability, it's great to see somebody in a movie or in an ad with a disability. It's like, okay, yeah, I feel represented.
I feel
That's
seen.
kind of nice.
With that being said, this climate of sensitivity, like I talk about it on my show often, as you guys know, and I even feel it kind of sometimes seeping into my own psyche, where I'll be like, whether it be as a woman or, I have an immigrant mom, like all these things, sometimes I'll catch myself around Me Too stuff or sexuality, and I'll be like, wait, like, am I being a little sensitive right now? Like, do you ever catch yourself in that moment where you're like, hold on, is this genuine and real? Or is this because of like, am I feeling a little type of way, like extra right now because of our climate?
I don't know. I don't think I really get that way because I'm just sort of like, it is what it is. That's how I am every day. I get a little like, oh God, you're gonna have to edit the hell out of it. I don't know what I think. I guess you do sometimes get that way, especially now that things are changing. So then when things haven't changed, you get like, well, why isn't it? You want it to be a certain way. Like when I went to Nashville to visit and I was looking at schools, I just wanted to hop in an Uber, but there were no accessible Ubers, right? So I was just like 100 times more frustrated than I would have been, just expecting things to be a certain way and they're not quite there yet. So you're like,
That's
you have a
interesting.
little bit, but not quite enough. But like, then you're like, all right, it's gotta take time and you have to dial it back and be.
That's interesting. So it may not be like a certain movie or an ad, but it's like day-to-day shit where you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
I guess in my day to day, I'll like the grocery store down the road or the corner store, and I'll wheel up on my board, and there'll be an advertising board or a sandwich board, and it's sitting right in front of right in front of the button for the the handicap door, the automatic door, and just maybe mention to somebody at the shop. I mean, I can get the door open on my own, but maybe not everybody. Or you see a ramp that's being blocked with whatever, or the handicap bathroom in a bar or restaurant is where they got a bunch of extra chairs stored. Stuff like that. I will bring it up to advocate. I've also, well, actually, one of my pet peeves right now is the accessible washrooms, and people in airports mostly going in there to have a cigarette, which those washrooms are also for people changing their baby's diapers. It's like, you are a low life piece of shit to go smoke in a handicap slash, mother's bathroom or whatever, father's parents' bathroom. But yeah, I've brought it up and been like, hey, you know what? There's a bathroom over there with 10 stalls for you to go to the bathroom in. Leave this for the people who need it. And I had one lady, she's like, well, I only ever go in there if nobody's in there. I'm like, that's any bathroom you go to. Like, I have issues if you're going into a public bathroom and you see somebody and stuff, like, I'm going in there anyways. But yeah, no, more for an advocating standpoint. Will I get maybe a little hypersensitive at times? I told you about my little buddy Owen. I get pretty defensive about my little buddy Owen, who's missing arms and legs and from the Chicago area. I'm I have thick skin, stuff I can just let roll off like water off a duck's back. There's days where I'm not having the best day that maybe irks me a little bit more, but I can still let it go. Not everybody has that thicker skin. So I want to advocate for them because I don't want people to deal with unnecessary bullshit if they don't have to.
Now, on the flip side, before we wrap, the fact that you guys are both so awesome and supporters and listeners of my show, when I often make fun of the PC culture. So that in and of itself is refreshing. It's like I have people like this who are, listening and on the cancel me baby train. Chris, you said to me yesterday, like, you said the inclusive language going on is hilarious. So when is it like too far and just silly?
Well, I think there'll be stories that I'll tell or jokes that I'll tell or whatever. Well, mostly stories at a presentation, and people will get offended on my behalf. It's like, no, I found it funny. You should feel it funny as well. But I mean, I mentioned earlier, hey, can I give you a hand with something or whatever, trying to get a leg up or like all those terms that are so, normal. That doesn't bother me when somebody uses it. I use those terms somehow. And so when somebody you know, hey, can I help you guys out? Like, well, that's not inclusive language. It's somebody's just trying to be kind and you use the word guys instead of people or folks or whatever.
Sure.
It's like, come on, is that really going to ruin the whole day? Is that really going to tip society on its ear and all chaos is going to break loose?
Right.
So, like it like within context, if somebody's being a dick and calls me a cripple, it's like, okay, nope, we're not doing this today. But
exactly.
you
picked the wrong day, buddy.
The simple phrase or whatever that I am guilty of using as well. Whatever. There's bigger tragedies in life.
And Caitlyn, how about you? Like anytime we're again, like when I even said, Chris's quote of like the inclusivity language of it all is just hilarious. I saw you laugh, and it's like I think we can all, to some degree, like acknowledge, like, yeah, it's gone a little kooky.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like I'll use everyday words that you would say all the time, and people are like dancing around them. I'll be like, yeah, I had to walk to the grocery store. Like, clearly I didn't walk to the grocery store, but you know what I meant? I got there. Like, people are so weird about like random little things that just don't change the point or the sentiment, and it's not worth getting excited over. So I don't really get why people have to be so careful about it, to be honest. Like you said, just don't be an asshole. Like,
not hard.
As long as you're not being mean, it's just not that difficult. Like you say something and it was offhand and it just happens. It is what it is. You can't crucify everybody for every little thing they say. But we do. So
now, lastly for you, this is kind of a twofold, and to really kind of, again, like just dive into your realities and the human of it all are there ever times, and Caitlyn, you kind of alluded to this earlier with like your life before all of this, like, honestly, are there ever times where you're envious of people with almost wish that you didn't have your circumstance, right? Or your situation? And secondly, on the total flip side of that, like I said, I mean, you two have the most incredible attitudes I've ever seen. You've gone on to accomplish and achieve things that anyone else wouldn't. So the flip side of that is like, no, you know what? Like, I don't wish anything else. This is my life. This is kind of the cards I was dealt, and here's what I've learned from it. Kind of like diving into both sides of that, if you will.
Sure. I mean, of course, like there's times where I'm jealous of people, or it's often things that I like didn't get to do that I would have liked to try, or the thoughts of the career I had planned in my head, but you never know what's going to happen. I could sit here and think, oh, like this is what I wanted to do and I'm missing out, but at the same time I don't know how it would have panned out. It could have panned out totally different. I could have hated it. Something else something else could have happened. You can't really say because you can only imagine what would have happened either way. I guess like you can only live in the moment. So you can't help but think about those things, obviously, just like you can't help but thinking about the future and what's going to come next, but you can't like dwell on it. Of course, it'd be great to go for a run, to do whatever, but you find a different thing to do, something else, something that is equally fulfilling. And there's plenty of things as long as you're creative and like open to trying it. You know, there's plenty of things I've did before that I still do now. Like, I don't know, go to Zumba. Am I doing like half of the class? Yes. Am I still enjoying myself? Yes.
And the power too in it's what I said earlier. I feel like neither of you have that victim mentality. It's like, yes, this is the situation and the reality, but like, fuck that. Don't tell me I can't do this. And I'm going to go on and do Zumba and get in my car and do all these things. Right. So kind of, you know, the balance of that, I think. And Chris, how about you? Last word.
Yeah, I mean, we all compare our lives to everyone else's. Comparison is the thief of joy. But when I was a teenager, I mean, everything annoys you. Everything is a big deal. So yeah, it was annoying that I was missing arms and legs, and my buddies had these doors, open to them, and I didn't. But it wasn't like it was a prevalent thing. As you get older, you get wiser. So yeah, there's days today, still to this day. I mean, if it snows and there's 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground, my day just got a hell of a lot longer and a hell of a lot more challenging. And it's a very short-lived, fleeting moment. Like, man, if I had arms and legs, I wouldn't have to slug through the snow in the board. But when you start letting those kinds of thoughts enter your mind and stay, you're wasting time and energy on something that you can't change. I don't have arms and legs. I'm never gonna have arms and legs. So why whinge and piss and moan about that? Concentrate on the positives and things are going well and move forward. There are times though that I wish I had a middle finger. Sometimes that would it's just necessary. And then, joking aside, I've had this question asked at a lot of presentations, especially school presentations. Kids will ask me if I ever regret or wish that I had arms and legs. Or, one of the neat questions I was asked is, when you dream, do you have arms and legs, or do you not have arms and legs?
Yeah.
And the only instance, and this is gonna come across as, very Canadian, but the only instance I wish, and the only time I've dreamt with arms and legs, is playing hockey. No other time. And I remember when I was a kid, my dad was playing senior hockey. Nat Palomino is our hometown team. And after one of the games, my mom took me down to the ice and handed me off to dad. I was like 4 or 5 years old, and dad did about 3 or 4 laps around the ice. And I remember that cool breeze blowing through my face. I remember it so vividly. And I will literally feel that sensation when I'm dreaming about playing hockey. Outside of that, I have no major regrets that aren't just like I said, a fleeting Jesus, it'd be easier if I had arms and legs. And it's like, okay, well, I don't, so move forward.
And that you have. Well, guys, thank you so much for today. And how does it feel doing stuff like this?
I don't know. I feel like I can never like get my thoughts straight. I have so many like feelings and thoughts about it because it is your everyday life that it's kind of hard to put into words sometimes. But in a very
I know that feeling. It's like, how do you even begin to convey something that means so much to you? And I can relate to that for sure. And Chris, I know you do this with motivational speaking and all that, so it's your bread and butter. But I'm curious, and I'm asking because again, it's like I can assume it's a balance of like, that's great, like let's bring light to this, but on the other end of it, again, like not being pegged as just this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have a lot more candid conversation. And just tell it like it is, which I not that I don't do that already. But you'll have a host that maybe is not quite as comfortable being like, just say it as it is. And so when your host is maybe a little apprehensive or shy or reserved, then you kind of take that lead or follow that lead, sorry. Whereas yeah, it is what it is. And no, and I mean, to if this helps somebody else, you know, be a little bit more comfortable in their own skin, whether they have a disability or not, and just be like, you know, fuck the outside stuff. Just do you to the best of your ability. And that's all you need to worry about, because that's the reflection you look at in the mirror every day, assuming the mirror's not too high up. But yeah, you know, that's, you know, you just need to take care of you and your happiness. And that's all that matters.
Well, you guys inspire me, and I thank you so much. I think my audience will love this and really take something from this. Again, I think that this is something people don't even know how to navigate. So your honesty and your willingness to be game today is everything. What should we call this episode? I don't even know. I was gonna, again, because I'm like, can we use, is disability the right thing? Does that capture it? And now I'm just like, well, fuck it. It's just gonna be like, Chris is packing heat and he's ready to go. Like episode 201. Like, so any suggestions are welcome.
I I was trying to come up with some clever how to work in cancel me, baby. You caught me off guard with that last thing you said.
Well, we'll come up with something and it will be epic.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. And it's very, very nice to meet you, Caitlyn. And yeah, just keep doing it.
Yeah, you too. It was nice to get to like talk to somebody. I don't know about you, like I'm not around other people with disabilities all that often.
Right.
Aside from like I go to physical therapy, I've got a lot of like elderly people who've had strokes and things, and they're lovely. I love
Yeah.
old people. They're great, but like also, you know, they don't have a similar life situation at all.
No, for sure. It's obviously it's always nice to have somebody that you can identify with. And that's, you know, going back to, you know, in advertising. Like see one person in a movie or in a, you know, magazine that is similar to you. They are, well, I'm not the only person in the world. So yeah, absolutely.
It's good to hear that, because even putting this together, like again, in the spirit of transparency, as I do, like, there was a part of me that wondered, like, again, the twofold of it. Like, I'm sure on one end it's great because it's like, let's have these candid conversations. It's my day-to-day life. And then there's a part of me that's wondering, like, is it annoying for you guys on some level that it's like, okay, you're grouping me in with this person that, like, we're both individuals and like one's experience isn't like mine. Like, we really have nothing to do with one another. And yet you're putting us in this camp. Like, these are all things, again, that kind of like, honestly, were going on in my head.
I think if you had like two people who I guess were more similar to me or more similar to Chris, like I think if you had two women in wheelchairs, it would be like that. Like there's like this whole group of
True.
girls out in LA and they have like a
Right.
dance team and they do all these things together. I'm like, the only thing we have in common is this, but where I feel like Chris and I have a similar like outlook on things, you know, like
Definitely.
it's an attitude that has nothing, I mean, does have to do with the disability, but doesn't necessarily like that's just the
Yeah.
attitude I was born with. If you were born with more limbs, you'd have the same kind of attitude, probably, you know.
Totally. Yep. And again, because of all this is something, I mean, you two were, because of your attitudes and like, both of you being in my orbit, like, again, this is something that I've been wanting to do for weeks and weeks. And finally, I just like DM'd you both being like, do you want to do this? So I'm really glad that that we were able to all pull it together and, because of that. So I thank you guys again.
No, and I'm glad you took the initiative, because yeah, there's probably a lot of people that want to create the forum to have the conversation that are hesitant for, well, what was Candace Owen or whatever, who criticized
Yeah.
I can't remember the
SKIMS.
clothing line, but it's like, come on, like people are just trying to do their best. Relax.
Chris, you're not buying Kim Kardashian's silky smooth underwear line? I mean,
Well,
what's
I
going
may have to
on?
look into it. I may have to look into it. I'm a Saks guy, but you know what? Maybe I'll have to look into these underwear.
He's like, I'm a Calvin Klein guy personally, but I
Yeah.
don't discriminate. All right, guys, thank you. I'm so sorry that we went over time, but this was so fascinating that I couldn't quite help myself. So
All good.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.